So welcome to Transform 2021 and this 2-hour tutorial offered to us by Olawale Ibrahim on machine learning and how he basically won the Force Machine Learning Hackathon. I'll let him tell you more about that. I would like to thank the sponsors, Studio X, without which this whole conference or event would not be happening. I'll talk more about that and the community behind this at the end. For now, I would like to introduce Olawale to you. He's an applied geophysics student at the Federal University of Technology, Akure in Nigeria. He's researching machine learning techniques for better seismic data interpretation. And he's also currently working part-time as a machine learning project consultant for DGB Earth Sciences. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Olawale to you. I'll hand over to him and enjoy.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the introduction, and yeah, welcome everyone to this tutorial. So before I go into the tutorial, I'd just like to personally introduce myself. Just like as Rob has mentioned, I'm a student of applied geophysics, researching machine learning techniques, unsupervised machine learning techniques for better seismic interpretation. And also, I'm currently a machine learning consultant with DGB Earth Sciences. And also, last year I was opportune to win the first machine learning lithology prediction competition. And so, a majority of what I'll be showing today in this tutorial will be referenced to the competition. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen now. So, all right. Yeah, and once again, thanks everyone for joining in. All right. Like I said, we'll be talking mainly about the first competition which I won last year. And before I go into it properly, I'll just give a run-up of how the tutorial is how I'm going to run the tutorial. So basically, we'll be making use of two notebooks for the tutorial, one for exploratory data analysis and the other for the machine learning modeling itself. All right, so I'm just going to have my screen in full screen mode. And all right, so for the run-up, this tutorial is going to be on lithofascist predictions from well log data, from the title big data lithology prediction. So from the competition itself, the data supplied for training the model was actually a lot of data from different wells, about 98 wells for the data. So I think it qualifies to call such a data big data. And also it had about over a million rows of data. So the tutorial is on lithofascist predictions from well log data. So this particular tutorial is going to run us through a typical machine learning workflow or pipeline. So we'll be getting and loading the data and then going through data cleaning if there's need be to clean the data. And then we'll be looking at data visualization and then exploring the data to get insights into how we could properly prepare the data so we could get good performance from our machine learning model. Then after moving from the data preparation, we'll train the model and get predictions out of it. And then we evaluate the model using different statistical metrics. I think the accuracy, the F1 score, and also the default metric provided by the organizers, the force organizers. And then we're also going to mention some model performance techniques which you could apply to improve the performance of our machine learning model. We'll be looking at augmenting the data sets and also cross-validation technique to improve the model score and also to get a very confident performance out of our model. And also we'll be looking at model regularization for a better training process. And then the second section will be focused mainly on the first competition itself. So we'll be covering key things to watch out for when working with big subsurface data in formats which we have it. And then also we'll be talking about how we could use gradient boosting trees and the possibility of this algorithm not converging while training the models, and also how KFold cross validation could help us to prevent this. And also we'll be selecting the proper cross validation techniques, like I mentioned, in making more confident decisions. And also be looking specifically into how we could prevent overfitting. So we are going to look at this by creating different validation data sets, and also on why on the choice of method for creating them. And we're making proper evaluations on these validation sets using different metrics. So yeah, with that, I think I can proceed into the exploratory data analysis notebook. So I'm just going to navigate into that now. All right. This tutorial, I'll be running it locally from my system, but I think the GitHub repository. Yeah, these notebooks are also on the GitHub repository. You could check that from the Slack channel, or also in the comments, in the description section of this YouTube live stream. So I'll be running this locally from my system, and same way I'm running it, you could also run it on Colab or on your local system also. So we'll be making use of this libraries, NumPy, Pandas, and also this library on Petrival, just for rendering faster visualization, Warlock's visualizations. All right, so this notebook covers the exploratory data analysis of the tutorial, which will help us to gain the necessary insight needed so that we could properly prepare our data sets and get best optimal predictions from the machine learning model which we'll be using. So over here we are importing the libraries, and then installing any other package which we need, in specific the Petrival package. And then all right, that's how it's still running. All right, after installation and importing the library, we can proceed to getting the data set. So the data set comprises of raw logs from 19 different wells from the North Sea. That is the training data set itself. And also the competition, an open test leaderboard was used for evaluating teams' performance. And then the final evaluation was made on a closed blind data set. So only the gamma ray log was present in all the walls, in all the walls 98 was provided, while some other walls had some of the logs, while some logs were completely absent in some walls. So loading the data set, over here we load the train data set and saved it into the variable train data. Same thing with the test data sets. So after loading the data set, we move to the data exploration and visualization. How we could visualize the data set and get more insights from it. So here the data is investigated to understand it better. That is the shape and the form. So since the data is a combination of 98 different wells, it will be time intensive to visualize each of the logs of these wells individually. So a combined approach was employed to visualize and explore these data sets. So both train and test data sets were explored simultaneously. So we could observe and take notes of variations in both data set, and know how we could resolve it while preparing our data set. So included checking basic information on the walls, that is the data itself, visualizing the percentage of each logs present in all wells, and also the percentage of missing values of each logs present in the wells, because we need to adopt a method for filling in these missing values. And also we also check the spatial distribution of the walls according to their coordinates. So we could see how the test walls are distributed, if they have an even distribution with the train data sets across the survey area. And also we just visualize some of the log plots just to see what we are working with. All right, so after importing the train data set, we are going to load it over here, and then we can see some of the logs present in the combined train data set itself. like you said, it's a combination of 98 different walls. So we have all these logs present in the combined training data set. So, and also we could also see this log first 2020 lithofasces lithology, which is the log for the lithofasces itself. So the lithofasces they will be denoted with these values. Later on, we are going to explore these values properly to understand what they represent, the lithofasces they represent actually. And also this log lithofasces 2020 the confidence log is just a measure of how the human interpreters, that is the geologists who prepare this data set, how confident they are about assigning a label to a particular sample. So the lithofasces confidence was about like had three different values, 1, 2, 3. 1 being the highest confidence they had in their interpretation for a particular lithofasces, and 3 being the lowest. So a value of 3 means they are not fully confident of the value which they have assigned to a particular sample. All right. So after then, just check the shape of the data set. So for the trained data set provided, it was about over 1 million rows of data, and also the test data set was just about 136,000 rows. So the test data set was just made up of 10 different rows actually. So all right. So like we said, over 1 million training data points. So it's safe to call this data. And also, we could also see that the test data set has 2 logs lesser than the trained data set from checking the shape. You can see the trained data set has 29 columns, while the test data set has 27 columns. So while we are still doing part of our exploratory data analysis is just to check the logs not present in the test data set. And since we know the test data set is what we are trying to predict the lithofasces of the test data set. So it's expected that we don't have the first 2020 lithofasces lithology log in it. So we made use of this cell to check those logs. And from the output, we could see that, yeah, as expected, the lithofasces lithology log is absent. And same thing with the confidence log, since we actually don't have any labels assigned to them. So there's no confidence logs for that. So right here, we just we check the columns present in the data set. So you can see a couple of columns, just like we visualized it in the table above. You can see the depths the mean depth column, the coordinates X, Y, Z, the groups, the formation, gamma ray log, and every other log present in the trained data set. All right. So over here, we are just trying to check the different data types of the logs. That is the data types of the logs in the data. So you can see that a majority of the logs are actually numeric logs from their data types floats, while just about three of it, that is the well column, and then the group and formation, their objects. So this log represent categorical variables, and we'll be looking into them just shortly. So from the above data types, like you said, there are 3 categorical logs denoted as objects. So getting more info on these logs will provide better insights on how we could properly encode these logs if we'll be using them to train our machine learning model and for making predictions also. So over here, we just check the number of, like we said, there are about 98 different wells. So we just checked them, we just confirmed that using this cell to do that. And then checking more info on the categorical logs, that is the formation log and the formation column and the group column. You can see that the formation column has 69 unique categories, 65 unique categories in it, and also the group column has 14 unique categories. So proper understanding of the dimensionality of the column will enable us to select a good encoding technique, which we use to encode the column. So over here, we're just checking the value counts, that is the count of each categories in the group column, and we can see some of this information. So the other land group has the highest count, while the time GP group has the least count. Then also checking the value counts for the formation, about 69 different formations. We could also see this information. All right. So over here in this section, we are just trying to check the percentage of each logs present in all wells. Like I mentioned earlier, not all wells had the same amount of logs or the same logs present in them. So I think it is important for us to just check on the distribution or the percentage of the logs present in the whole data set. So this code over here was this block of code over here was used to achieve that. And this code was extracted from Matthew Nicoli GitHub repository during the first competition. So I just extracted that and just use it to display the logs. All right, so it's going to take a bit of time to display the logs. Yeah, to display the visualizations. So over here, that's what we are just trying to do. Looping through each of the walls, and then getting the occurrence of each of the logs present, and then we just plot it. All right. So over here we can see the plots, the visualizations of the plots according to the percentage of their presence in all 98 non-98 walls. So you can see some of these logs have a complete they are complete in all the walls. That is the location, the coordinates, and also the group log, the formation log. But we could also see some of the logs, like for example, the specific gravity log just has about, I think, close to about 15 or 10% in all the training walls. Also, same thing was also done for the test data set. So this percentage distribution is for the train data set. While over here we check for the test data set, for the test data set also. That is the 10 logs which are provided to test the machine learning models. So we can see it's quite similar to the training. You can see it's quite similar to the training visualization itself. Apart from we can see that the SDR log does not occur in any of the test walls at all. And also the mod width is just happening about, I think, maybe 5% in all the 10 was provided. All right, we've been able to visualize the logs according to how the wells according to how they occur. And okay, over here we are just checking how the logs are present based on their missing values, based on the missing values present in it. So we made use of this line of codes to extract that information. So over here we got for the train data set and the test data set. So we just do this to see what we're talking about. So over here now we have the information on that. You can see that the X log is about 99.07% on present. Same thing with other log. Like I said, the gamma ray log is present in all the walls. So okay, over here then we try to remove logs that have 100% occurrence, because we're just trying to visualize the percentage of missing logs. So we remove that in this particular set of code. And running this visualization now, you can see the distribution, like how complete the data set is in itself. So just again, the SGR log is still, it has a lot of missing. So the reason why we are visualizing the data set is just to select the proper technique which we use to fill up the missing values when we want to train our model. That is during the data preparation stage. So we might not be selecting every log here. So the remaining logs will still need to fill up the missing values in a way that won't really affect, in a way that is going to, our machine learning model is still going to get a very good results. So we are just trying to get a good data set to feed into our model. So it's imperative for us to check the missing logs and how we could the percentage of the missing logs and how we could fill up these values. So we did that for the train data set, and also for the test data set. So this visualization is quite similar to checking the percentage of logs present in all the wells. All right, and so okay, when we get to the data preparation stage, we'll be filling up these missing values. Like I said, we'll be filling up these missing values, and some of this log that does not have a particular amount or percentage of values will be dropped from the model. So over here, we are visualizing the train labels, that is the little fasces itself, to see how just to see how they occur in the data set. So like in the table which I showed earlier on, we could see that the little fasces were denoted with they're denoted with some numbers. So we visualize that now. So over here, we are just getting the value counts, and we're just getting the value counts of the of the labels, that's the little fasces from the data itself. And from the competition, like from the data, we have 12 different labels: shale, sandstone slash shale, marl, dolomite, limestone, chalk, elite, anhydrite, tuff, coal and basement. So these are the 12 little fasces in the training data set provided. So these are the little fasces we are going to be predicting in the test data set which was given. All right, so over here we just check the value counts. Like I said, the little fasces were denoted with these values: 65,000, 30,000. So 65,000 corresponds to shale, while 30,000 corresponds to sandstone, 650,030 corresponds to sandstone slash shale, up to the last one, basement, which corresponds to 93. So from here we can see that the shale has the highest occurrence in the data set. So over here we just plotted the visualization to see how they occur. So we can see that the data set is highly imbalanced, with the shale having about 60% occurrence, while some other little fasces like basement, coal, and top, they have very little occurrence. So our machine learning model will also have to take this into consideration. So into consideration, because the test data set and also the blind test might not have this distribution of values. So we don't want our model to be biased into predicting shale. So we are also going to take note of this while preparing while selecting a good machine learning model to train our model. All right. Okay, over here we just check the spatial distribution of the train and test wells. Like I said, it would be good to have the test wells properly distributed across all the train wells. So the data preparation technique which we'll be applying to the train data set is also going to apply to the test wells. So from here we can see that okay, the test wells are colored in red, while the train wells are colored in green. So you can see that the test wells are properly distributed across the locations of the training data set. So we could apply the same, we could use all the wells to train the models, since it's going to give us a good representation. And yeah, all right. So that was what we achieved. We tried to visualize over here. So we can prepare both train and test data sets in the same format, or using the same techniques. All right, and also, why it might be impossible to view all train and test logs, I think we can check, we can just visualize some of the logs. That is a log from the test data set, and also a similar log, a log in the train data set, which has close proximity with each other. So we are selecting this well 15914 from the test data set to just visualize some of the logs in it. So we are visualizing the gamma ray log and the neutron porosity log, SP log, and TTC log. Then for the train data set, we selected the log. We selected a well very close to the test well, which we just selected. That is the 15 log. And we just visualize some of the logs also. to just compare to just see what we are working with before moving to the modeling notebook and performing. Yeah. All right. Okay, so that's all from the EDA part section. So we're making use of this the knowledge gained from this exploration which we've done to prepare the data sets which will fit to the machine learning algorithm. All right. All right. Okay. Over here, the second part of the notebook, which is also the last. So this notebook covers the modeling techniques used for getting optimal prediction results from the machine learning model. So for the data cleaning and preparation, a lot of cleaning was not done because the data itself it has been pre-cleaned up by the organizers, the suppliers of the data sets. So in this section, we'll be looking at the necessary steps and processing to get the train and test data sets in an acceptable form by the chosen machine learning algorithm which we'll be using. All right. All right. So we'll be creating validation data sets and also be selecting interested logs based on the insights which we got from the exploratory data analysis which we just concluded, and also be resolving the missing values based on any technique which we choose, and then we'll be encoding the categorical variables which we identified, and then proceeding to data augmentation. Yeah, data augmentation. So over here we imported the libraries which will be used for everything which we've mentioned, and also these libraries are also what we use for the exploratory data analysis, NumPy, pandas, and also be making use of the XGBoost packing library to train our model. So when we get to that, we'll explain more. On that. And then, all right. So that's just that. So after importing the libraries, we also import the train and test data sets which we'll be using. And over here, we have something called the penalty matrix. For the computation, the organizers provided the default metric which will be used for calculating as a judge, as a model performance judge. So the penalty matrix was introduced so that very wrong predictions could be penalized differently from slightly wrong predictions. So say for example you're predicting a light instead of sandstone, you'll be more penalized for that compared to when you're wrongly predicting sandstone as show. So that was the whole purpose of the penalty matrix. So it was just like to model a real petrophysical interpreter like that. So that was why the penalty matrix was introduced. So over here we can see that it's a 2D array of 12 rows and 12 columns. So when you predict a particular lithofasces and you're right, you don't get penalized. You have a value of 0. But when you're predicting sandstone as, maybe for example, sandstone as shield, you get penalized with a value of 2. And when you're predicting, for example, a light instead of sandstone, you get penalized with a value of maybe 3.75. So the higher the value, the total value of this of your errors, the wronger the predictions made. All right. So over here we have the visualizations explaining more about that on the penalty matrix itself. And over here we have a function which will be used for computing the sum of errors from the predictions made. So we have this function over here for that. Later on we'll be making use of these functions to this metric to evaluate the model. So like I said, for the competition, you need to create validation sets. so we don't end up overfitting the public leaderboard, because like we know, the blind data sets which will be used for final evaluation might have different little fascist distribution, and might even be from different a different location spatial distribution compared to what we have on the open test in the open test data set. So it's important for us to create validation data sets which we use to properly evaluate changes made on the machine learning model. So when we are trying to improve the performance of our machine learning model, we can properly evaluate that without overfitting the open test data set. So, like I said, it is important to build machine learning models that will generalize better on symbols. And having no idea how the blind words would come, that is the geospatial distribution, even the logs present, there was actually no specific guide in selecting validation words that will be used. So the words were selected randomly from the trained data sets to create two validation sets, and each validation set comprised of 10 different words each. So that was what we tried to achieve in this section. So that was what we tried to achieve in this section. So we have the train words. We are extracting the names of all the 98 words in the data set. So we are printing the total. We are just printing the total, and over here we are specifying the random seed just to ensure reproducibility. And then, like I said, we are selecting random wells from the trained data sets to make up the validation data set. So for this particular one, just print out the list of the wells which we selected to make up the first validation set. So we have this wells name which will be used for creating the first validation. And then after selecting the names that will make up the first validation data set, we need to remove these well names from the initial train well names, so that we could have wells in our second validation set that does not that is not in our first validation data set. So that was what we tried to achieve here. We tried to remove the validation was that is the first validation was named from the initial training was. So we have 88 was currently that we are working with. And over here we just extracted 10 other was name for the second validation set. I'm just printing out the length to confirm that we are good to go. And over here, we just created the third validation set, which is just a combination of the first validation set and second validation set. So okay. Later on during this workflow, I'll be explaining why we are doing that. All right. So after selecting the world's name, which will make up our validation data set, we need to get the data set itself from the initial trained data set provided. So we made use of this function to do that, and then we saved our data set into these variables validation 1 and validation 2. So printing that out now, now we have our first validation set, and also the second validation set. So right here we just combine both some validation sets into the third validation set which we'll be using, and then we just visualize the validation sizes, that is the data set size. Then after extracting our validation data sets from the initial trained data set, is important for us to drop out this data set from the trained data set, so we don't end up, so there's no form of data leakage while training and evaluating our models. So we are dropping the validation data set from the trained data sets in this cell of codes. So I think that takes a little time to run. And then after doing that, we proceed to QCing the data set to ensure that there are no data leakage. So the way we do that is just to find the sum of the validation data sets which we've created plus the initial new train data sets which we've just created, and ensuring that it matches the initial original train size. So you can see that the previous training data rows is about over 1 million rows, like I said, 1,170,511 rows. And also the new validation and the train data set, the validation data set and the validation and the new train data set row, the new train rows. We can see that they correspond. So there's no form of data leakage. We have our data set properly complete. So over here, we are just trying to check that we are trying to confirm that all samples of the labels, that's the lithophages, are present in the train data set, because for some of these samples, they don't really occur in the train data set. So it's important for us to ensure that they are still in the train data set and haven't been just taken into the validation data set, because we need our model to train on all available lithophages present in the data set. So you can identify any of these lithophages in the test or blind data set which we have provided. Okay, all right. We can see over here that I think one of the lithophages is actually missing. That is the basement lithophages. So we might need to create the validation data set again by specifying a different random seed and hoping we can get that particular lithophages back in the new training data set. So we'll just run this cells of codes again to do that. Because if you don't have all the lithophages present, it will be, I don't know, it will be like our model won't be able to recognize and identify it if it was to be present in the test data set or the blind well. So we'll try to achieve that again. So we are creating a validation data set again. So in this new run which I'm running, we are going to get different. We'll be getting different wells in it, and hopefully we could get the particular well which are the basement samples in it in our train data set. So we create our validation data set, and then we just check to see. So once we get all the labels in, or all the lithophages in our new train data set, then we can proceed. Just again, we are not having this, and I specify this seed just to ensure reproducibility, but we're having issues getting that particular well in it. So we could just use a different random seed this time, and just hope we get that. So that particular well must have been in one of the validation data sets, but we need it in the train data sets. So we can train our model on all samples. All right. Hopefully we are going to get it this time around. All right. So we've been able to get that. So now we have all our lithophages labels present in our new training data set. So now we can proceed to other preparation procedures. So over here we'll be selecting logs which will be used for training the models. So the logs were selected based on how they occur. That is the percentage of their occurrence in the data set. So logs having missing values greater than 70% were actually dropped from the data set, and the remaining logs were filled using a technique which will be shown very soon. All right. So far here we are just visualizing. Okay, like I said, we are selecting logs based on their occurrence. So we are making use of the test data sets to do this. So any log that has missing values greater than 70% in the test data set will be dropped both from the training data sets and also from the test data set itself. So you can see some of the logs are fully present, the world depth, gamma ray log, the group log. Why some logs are having percentage of missing, why some logs have just about 21% values present in them. So we'll be dropping some of these logs. I think the RXO log and the RMIC log, the cow log, and other logs like that. So we've already specified it here. So for better and faster processing, the train, validation, and test data sets will be concatenated so we can process them together, as we need these data sets to be in the same format and also to get good predictions out of the machine learning model. So we're performing the same preparation techniques on the trained data set and the validation data set and also the test data set. So we'll be combining these data sets into a single data frame. So processing could be done faster and uniformly. All right, so we are going to be making use of the data set indices to do this. That is the number of rows present in each of these data sets. So over here, we are extracting the number of rows for the trained data sets, test data set, and the true validation data sets which we are using. And then now we are concatenating each of these data sets into a single data frame. So we have a data set which has this form. So the trained data set occurs at the topmost part of the data frame, followed by the test data set, then the validation 1, validation 2, and validation 3. So after processing has been done on this combined data frame, we are going to split them back into their respective according to the number of rows in which they have. We'll be splitting back these data sets into their individual form. So now we are just checking the combined shape of the data set. So the procedure below is just to extract the data needed for the augmentation procedure, which will be performed after every other preparation has been performed. So we are going to make use of the world names and also the mean depth, the depth of the logs to perform the augmentation techniques. So when we get there, we are going to talk better on this. All right. So in this line of code, we are just making a copy of our data frame. So in case we run into an error later on, we could just come back and create a new copy since we've combined. Okay. Yeah, since we've combined our data sets already. Okay, so these initial copies are just previous copies of our data sets. That is the train, test, and validation sets before moving to the augmentation procedure. So here we are getting the values, the names of the wells, and also their depths, so that we can perform the augmentation procedure later on. So the reason why we are doing that right now is because if we proceed with the preparation, we are not going to have the data in a format that will enable us to perform the augmentation, because we'll be encoding some of these logs, and then we won't be able to get the exact values or the exact data needed for the augmentation. So now after that, we are trying to get the labels, that is the dataset lithofascist labels, which will be used to train the model and also be used to evaluate the models. So like we have the trained data, the trained labels, which we extracted into this variable, and also that for the validation data set itself. Like we also mentioned that the lithofascists were denoted with these values. So there's a need for us to convert these values to actual continuous values, so the machine learning models could take it and process and make use of it in the right format. So we make use of this cell for that. So we map each of these values to their corresponding continuous values, that is from 0 to 11. So our sandstone is now having a value is denoted as 0, as opposed to 30,000. And also sandstone shale is having one, same thing with shale and every other little fascist present in the data set. So we make use of the map function over here to achieve that. So after the mapping, we can see our little fascists having the new values assigned to them. So this is just for the for the validation, the first validation, that is the little fascist present in it. You can see a lot of it is actually shale. So after that, we proceed into data encoding. But just before then, let's take a 10 minutes break. So we'll get back to this. We'll get back to the data encoding after the break. So we are just going to have a 10 minutes break. I'll be back. I'll be back after that. All right. So we are back from the short break, and thanks everyone for staying. Yeah, for staying in. All right. So before the break, we checked just we're still on preparing the data sets. So we were able to convert the lithology labels from the default numbers which was given to actual numbers which the machine learning models could take in. And just before the break, we were to look at encoding the categorical variables. So right here we are trying to encode the categorical columns which we identified during exploratory data analysis. So in a format that the machine learning models algorithm could take, because the algorithm can take in actual textual data. So we need to encode the categories of each columns into actual numbers, distinct values. So the encoding is going to be done in such a way that the each unique categories in the data set will be assigned the value of from 0 to 0, 0, 1, depending to the number of unique categories present in each column. And also, so encoding works in different ways. You could encode using this format which I just talked about, which is referred to as label encoding the column. You could also encode using one-hot encoding where each category is encoded with zeros and ones depending on the number of categories present. But for the competition, actually, the label encoding performed better because it gave better validation and also open test performance compared to one-hot encoding it. And also, if we were to one-hot encode the columns, for example, the formation column, which had about 69 unique categories, we'll be adding additional 69 columns to our data set. Additional 69 columns to our data set. And so the data set gets too large and bulky due to this very high dimensionality of the column. So it was better to use the label encoding techniques to encode the categorical variables. So we also encoded the well columns because from validation, the validation results actually performed better. It was better when we used the well column compared to when we dropped it. And I also think this was also due to how the data augmentation was done. So right here we are just encoding those columns which we've identified as the categories, which are the group formation and also the word columns. So this is okay. Before that, let's just check the shape of the data sets before encoding. So data frame dot shape. we have 29 columns in our original data set. So after encoding, we now have additional 3 columns. That is the group encoded, formation encoded, and also the wall encoded. And then let's just visualize this and just to see what we're talking about. So we have data frame dots. Data frame dots head. So we can see these additional columns which have been encoded. So we now have our columns, our data, our categorical data in a format that the machine learning model could make use of. So each of the categories initially identified here as, for example, Nordland now has a new value from the encoding, which is a value of I think 6. Okay, for the formation for the group, a value of 6. Same thing with every other categories. You just check the value counts to see what we're talking about. So data frame dots to check the value counts of group encoded, which is the encoded column value counts. So now we can now see that the groups of the data set now have these values as opposed to their initial original names. Also, okay, so also the same thing applies to the formation and also the wall columns. So we can say any value that has a value of any we can see some of the formation values as not a number. So the missing values in it also gets encoded. It also gets encoded depending on according to number which was assigned to it by the encoding algorithm, which is the label encoding technique which we used. So after encoding, we can now drop these previous columns, the actual textual columns, which we no longer need. So we drop them over here. And then to fill in up the missing values. Okay, before then, let's just check. Okay, let me use this. Let's just check the percentage of missing values now in our data sets. Remember, we dropped some of the logs which we're not using based on having a very high number of missing values or not being logged in some balls. So we dropped some of those balls. And then now we now have these logs which still has missing values, and we are trying to fill up. So to fill up the missing values, some fractions of the missing values still exist in present logs. So how do we resolve that? So for filling missing values, we could approach it in different ways. We could make use of the mean values in a particular window of the log to fill up the values. Or we could also make use of backward or forward fill in pandas to do this. Or we could also decide to fill up the missing values with a distinct value different from other values. So this was actually the approach which we used, which we'll be using for this tutorial and also for the competition. That was what I used, because this way the machine learning algorithm can in this case particular the gradient boosting algorithm XGBoost can be able to differentiate these unique and distinct values from the rest. So I think it's actually better if we can make use of a distinct value compared to using mean values that might not actually represent what is in that particular missing spots. So it's always better to use a distinct and separate values from every other value in the log, so the machine learning model can identify the value as representing something. In this case, missing values. So and also from validation, the -999 which we used to fill up the missing values had a better performance, had a better results compared to other techniques which we use for filling up the missing values. And also, since this is a classification problem as opposed to a regression, whereby the outliers values used in filling the missing values could have an effect on the output of the logs. That is for actual lithology prediction. That is values prediction, not classification. If we use -999, it could have an effect on the output. That is the log signatures. But since this is a classification problem, it does not really have effect like that. And again, since it's a tree-based algorithms, and the way tree-based algorithms work does not take note of outliers like that. So it's a safe option and a better option to fill up the missing values. So we did that over here, and then we just checked to confirm that we no longer have missing values in our data set. And also, rather than if you'd like, you could decide not to use -999 based on the algorithms which you'll be using, which is the XGBoost. So the XGBoost has a way to handle missing values internally. So then proceeding to, okay, after filling up the missing values, now we've completed the majority of the data preparation. And now we can now split back our concatenated data frame. So after preparing the data set, the combined data set, now we can now split them back into their individual data set. That is the train data set and the validation data set, and also the test data sets. So over here, we are making a copy of the prepared data frame to work with. So if there's any error later on, we could just come back to these points and just pick it up from there without having to run the previous cells again. So yeah, remember the shape of the concatenated data frame. We have the train data set followed by the test data set, and then the validation data set followed in the combined data frame. Then after that, we made use of we got the number of rows, that is the indices of this concatenated data frame. So we're making use of the indices to split back the individual data frames into their original form. So that was what we tried to do over here. So we are getting the training features into this. We are getting the training features, and then we're also dropping the labels itself, because we won't be making use of the labels as the inputs, but rather as the targets. So we perform the same thing with the test data sets, validation data sets, and the pre-validation data sets actually. So after that, we just check the shape to confirm that we have the initial training, the training size, and also the test size, and also the validation size from what we initially had before concatenating. So just to ensure that we have the right samples which are working with. So yeah, that brings us to the data augmentation. So now we can now augment each of these data sets, because we don't want to augment. It won't be good to augment the whole concatenated data frame. So we've splitted back into the individual data sets. So we are going to be augmenting each of these data sets individually. So the data augmentation technique was extracted from the ISPL team code, that is for the 2016 SEG machine learning competition. So their technique was based on the assumption that fishes do not just abruptly change from a particular depth layer to the next one. So they implemented this by aggregating the features at neighboring depths and computing this the feature spatial gradients. So I extracted their codes from their repo and made use of it to perform the augmentation procedure. So they are like I mentioned, their technique was based on fishes do not just abruptly change from a particular depth layer to the next. So the assumption is based on the fact that in a particular location, you don't just have fishes jumping from one formation to the other. So it's always like a gradual change. So that is what these functions is trying to achieve. So the augmentation the images of a polynomial function to augment the whole data set, that is the logs itself. And then the output of the augmentation resulted in like 4 times the initial number of columns present in it due to the polynomial, I think a quadratic function which was using the augmentation, these augmentations functions. So augmenting the data set over here, that was what we made use of the functions to augment the data set. So you can see the shape of the data set has 28 columns before augmentation was done. And then after augmentation was done, it got increased to 112 columns. So now we have more values which properly represents how the facies changes from one layer to the next. So I'm going to run this cell now. So it might take a bit of time to get the augmentation complete, since we are running it on 4 different data sets. And also, yeah, it's going to take a bit of time. I think about a minute or two. So why that goes on? Let's just this is going to be the output of the augmentation. That is for the trained data set augmented. So you can see some of these rows padded just to achieve that output of gradual change from one layer to the next. So after augmentation is done, okay, over here we can see the original data set before augmentation and after augmentation has been done. So while that still goes on, let's just give it a minute to get that completed. All right, it's taking a bit of time. So after that is done, we'll proceed to training the models. So we're making use of the XGBoost algorithm to train the models. So the XGBoost is a gradient boosting algorithm. So it follows a tree-based it's actually a tree-based model itself. So now the augmentation has been complete. And then we just have the augmented data frame here and the trained data set itself, the original trained data set itself. So we'll be making use of this augmented data sets to train our model. So the augmentation technique actually improved the model performance compared to the using just the unaugmented data set. So a particular case, a particular time during the competition, I think I was after applying the augmented procedure, I think it later moved me up on the leaderboard, and yeah, it was a good thing to see. And yeah, thanks to the ISPL team for their code once again. All right, to the model training. So the choice of algorithm for the tutorial workflow is XGBoost, because from the competition it performed better. That is on the validation data set which was used, and also even on the training on the open test data set, it performed better. And also it had a faster compute speed compared to the CalcBoost algorithm. So the CalcBoost is also a gradient boosting algorithm, but the CalcBoost algorithm was taking a lot of time to train the models. And also based on the performance also, so it outperformed every other algorithm which I tried for the competition. So the random forest also was used. Actually, it was the initial algorithm which I was using, because during the competition it was quite hard. Like from previous competition knowledge, gradient boosting algorithms have always outperformed random forest, and though random forest is also good. But during the start of the competition, it was hard to get the gradient boosting algorithms to converge. So it was not really doing a good job at the time, which I could not figure out why. So I resorted to using the random forest algorithm for a major part of the competition. Then towards the end, I figured out a way to use the XGBoost algorithm properly, which I'll also be mentioning just now. So yeah, we also made use of the tenfold cross-validation techniques. So this was done to get a better performance and a more confident results. So when we are trying to improve our model, maybe based on the performance we've seen on the validation data sets, we can be sure that we are not changing our model, maybe hyperparameters or model techniques, filling missing values and things like that, based on randomness from the model training itself. But we'll be sure that we are making the changes based on things which we've actually confirmed. That is the performance metrics accuracy which you are seeing is actually is actually reflecting the changes which we made to the machine learning algorithm. So this cross-validation technique help us achieve that. So the way it works, okay, before I get there, let's just talk about, okay, the okay, over here we have the evaluation function. So the model will be evaluated based on the default score, that is the initial penalty matrix which we showed, and also on the accuracy and F1 score matrix. All right. So proceeding to the cross-validation technique. So the way cross-validation works is that rather than using the full training data sets to train the model and making the predictions, so the cross-validation and just getting an accuracy, we are trying to get a kind of method whereby we can properly evaluate the model, like I said. So the cross-validation techniques takes the data and splits it into a number of parts, equal parts, which you must have specified, in this case, 10 parts. So by splitting it into 10 different parts, it takes one of the samples, one of the folds, let's call this fold. Yeah. It takes one of the folds and makes it the test or the old out data sets. And the remaining 9 folds, the many 9 parts of the data set, it makes use of it as a training data set. So it trains on these 9 parts and makes predictions on the ODOT data set and evaluates the predictions. So this is done making use of each independent fold that has split the data into. So it makes use of each of these folds to evaluate the model. And then it computes a kind of average performance from using different models to train. And then this average performance will be like the proper representation of how the model is going to perform on unseen data sets. And also the way we also applied the cross-validation technique in such a way that it acts like a form of assemble method. So we are making use of 10 different parts of the data sets to train the model and then to make predictions on the model. So we predicted the probabilities, not actual labels, the probabilities from 10 different training process, and then finding the average of these probabilities and taking the highest probability as the label of a particular sample. So over here we are going to show more on how we did that. So we are specifying a 10K-fold validation, cross-validation technique, and then we are making use of the stratified K-fold. So we have the stratified K-fold, and we also have the normal K-fold. So we are making use of this stratified K-fold just to solve the class imbalance issue we have. So when the algorithm is splitting the data set into 10 different parts, it can properly split these lithophasis labels according to the percentage of how they occur in the data set. So each of the folds is going to have an equal representation of the lithophasis in it. All right, so that was why I made use of the stratified K-fold instead of the usual and normal K-fold. And then we specify the end split, number of folds which we want it to split into. And also this shuffle parameter is actually, yeah, I'll just talk about that now. So for the competition, I initially mentioned that it was hard getting the gradient boosting algorithms to converge while training on the data set. So from my observation, I thought this was because the data set is large itself. So the algorithm was finding a lot of information and probably overfitting, getting a lot of information. So that was why it was hard for it to converge. So then making use of this K-fold technique, and then specifying the value into false. I observed that the model was able to converge easily because, okay, before, let's just talk about the model itself. That is the XGBoost model. It was the number of trees which they used parameter here was the subsample co-sample by 3, the regularization lambda. So this main argument, that is hyperparameters, were finally gotten based on validation from continuously validating each steps or changes made on the model. So that was how we were finally able to arrive on these values. So that's what I'm saying. So the way the SD boost model initially works, or how I use it before, is that you specify the number of n estimators you want to use. So usually I usually specify a very large number, say for example 10,000. But I know the training doesn't always get to 10,000 before converging, because after specifying this, you also specify the early stopping rounds. That is, you want your model to stop training after a particular time that the model has stopped improving. That is when the loss stops decreasing. So you specify the number of early stopping rounds. But like I said, for the competition that is the subsurface data, like even after specifying 100,000 and training on collab, it keeps running, and even the early stopping round could not stop. It could not stop because the model, it was unable to converge. That is, the loss kept on decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And I knew this was probably overfitting and not really working well. So yeah, that brings us back to this shuffle method. So while trying different things during the competition, at the point I changed the shuffle parameter to false. So what this shuffle method does is that when we are trying to split our data sets into, in this case, 10 different parts, rather than just okay, when we are using the value of false as a shuffle, so it just splits the data set without shuffling it, that is to 10 different parts. So each ODAT data has unique set of values to evaluate on. But when you shuffle, there's always a possibility of the data sets found in one particular fold being found in a different fold. So at the point during the competition, I just decided to try that out. And then I observed that when I tried that, when I changed the value to false, the model was finally able to converge. So initially, even before trying this cross-validation technique and just using a straightforward approach, that is just training on a single model, the model wasn't converging. But then when using the cross-validation technique and then specifying the shuffle into false, that we don't want the data set to get shuffled, we were able to get that the model was able to converge. So then at that point, we were able to get the result on the open test leaderboard, and also the validation scores actually improved at that point when we were able to get the model to converge. But then the final model which was submitted, we made use of shuffle equals to true, because when I was able to get the model to converge, I noticed I tried to observe the point, that is the number of n estimators where the model stopped training. And rather than just using the false to get the model to converge, so I changed the value to true, and then just arrive at the value here for the number of n estimators based on the observation which had been done previously. So like I said, we also made use of this regularization lambda because I'm mentioning it because it's greatly improved the score, that is on the leaderboard and the validation score. So the regularization lambda is just a kind of regularization parameter that helps the model to train better without overfitting. So it introduces some kind of randomness into the data set, some kind of, should I call it, some kind of bias into the model to prevent it from overfitting. So the model training process, the weight decay it converges slowly rather than quickly converging, which could be a sign of overfitting. So this regularization lambda greatly improved the model performance both on validation and also on open test leaderboard. So over here we're able to initialize the XGBoost model, and then proceeding to the cross validation technique. So okay, all right, like this. So now we have the cross validation technique. We selected the number of folds which we want the models to train on and make predictions with. So over here we just initialize a set of empty arrays. That is an arrays of an arrays which is going to keep the predictions made by the 10 folds, by the 10 models which we'll be using to train the models. So I'll just show an output here. So we have, for example, the test prediction. That is for the test data set itself, and also the 3 validation data sets. We have empty arrays, which is going to keep the probabilities of the models. You can see these empty arrays. So for each model training and the probabilities of the labels of the lithophages is going to get assigned. Like this is going to get stored in this array. That is for all 10 models, and at the end of it, we are going to find the average and select the index with the maximum probability as our lithophages label, as our lithophages itself. So after that, over here we implemented the cross validation technique. So we are going to be training with 10 different folds, 10 different subsets of the data set, and making predictions on it and saving the predictions into these empty arrays. So that's what happens over here. Okay, for the first fold, actually, we can see the model training, and we can see, okay, over here is just the number of samples. Over here, the number of samples, the training samples, and also the test sample, which will monitor the training process. So we implemented the cross validation techniques here, and though this early stopping was actually not useful again, since we are making use of the true default parameter. Okay. So for the training was not done on my local system. It was done on the cloud. That is Colab. So I'm just going to show the output for that. Yeah. So we won't be able to run the training because it might take some time. I think about 10 minutes. That is on a GPU. But I'm just going to show how the result is. So this notebook is also the same thing I have with on my local system. I'm just trying to show how the model trained. A minute, please. Okay, yeah. So now we have the model training based on the hyperparameters which we specified, and also the cross validation techniques. So it gets trained on 10 different times. That is on 10 different folds, and make the predictions on the validation data sets. So for a particular fold which was for training, that is the first validation, you can see the accuracy, like 0.78, that's 78% accuracy, and also the default metric which was used for evaluating. So the closer this value is to 0, the better the performance. So it gets trained on the 10 different folds, and then is assigning the probabilities to the empty list of arrays which we created. So okay, back to this. All right. So after the training has been done, we find the probabilities. We find the average probabilities that we've computed, and then we convert the NumPy array to a data frame so that we can properly extract. So we can extract the index of the index position with the highest probability as the lithology class. Then after the index has been extracted, we've been able to predict each samples in our test data sets and also in our validation data sets. So based on the validation results, over here I already ran these cells of code. Okay, sorry. I'll just use the Colab to show that. So over here, after getting our model to train, and then computing the probabilities, and then finding the average, we are going to evaluate the models based on the functions which I already showed previously. So for this particular run, we'll be able to get an accuracy of 0.78%. That's for validation, the first validation. Then also the second validation is like almost 75%. And then the combined validation, which is about 76% accuracy. But then the default score is actually what was used for as a final judge, as by the organizers. So when you are trying to improve, I was trying to improve my model, or if you are trying to improve yours, the default score was what was on mind, like what I was really trying to improve, and not the accuracy and the score. So the whole point of it is that when you're maybe in a competition, or you are trying to evaluate your machine learning model, maybe for research or anything, just get validation data sets where you'll be able to compare any changes which you made on your data or your model, so you can properly like I said, we make use of two different validation data sets. So when I made some changes during the competition, for example, the first validation itself might get improved, while the other one doesn't get improved. So that was why we have a combined data sets, validation data sets of the two, which could act as a judge to tell us that, yeah, our changes is improving the model, and then we can also keep improving it, since we are trying to beat every other competitor. So yeah, that's just the point. So okay, the whole summary of the thing is, by selecting a good cross-validation technique, which will give you confident result, as well as a kind of model ensemble. Properly evaluating your models and changes on the validation sets, and taking note of the changes and observing what improves the model, is just a way to go about the competition. So yeah, I think that wraps up my tutorial. Thanks everyone for listening. So I'll just hand over to the host now, Rob. I stop sharing my screen. So if you have any question, you could just drop it on the chat in the Slack channel, and I'll be glad to attend to it. So thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Olawale. Maybe you'd like to turn your webcam on so we can wrap this up together. I'd like to extend a warm thank you to Olawale for all the work he's done. You probably don't realize, but he was preparing all of this at the same time as taking some exams. So kudos to him, and thanks from all of us at the Software Underground. Thank you to the sponsor, Studio X, of course, without which this wouldn't be happening. And as Olawale told you, he's going to try to join the conversation in Slack. We had a few technical glitches. There are very short interruptions in audio. If you're watching this in YouTube, I would recommend you go to the Slack channel. Everything is linked in the YouTube description. And just ask Olawale any questions you have. And with that, again, thank you. And remember to like and subscribe to this stream. And we'll see you over in Slack. Thank you. Bye-bye.